I think we're gonna start to be on track with the timing. Just get everybody outside, inside. If you know some friends, just write them. What are you doing outside? This is more important than coffee. All right, so the talk is called The Importance of Privacy on iOS, and I'm going to start by telling you who I am. I have a little bit of a schizophrenia with my name, or my nickname. My real name is this very Spanish thing, and the beer icon shouldn't be there, but it's from the previous slide. But on Twitter, I'm stuffmc. Some people in the industry call me with my real first name, being Manuel or Manu, or some people call me Stuff. A few things about me, because this is ethical, so it's a lot about the way I see the world. I'm what I call myself like an Apple technologist at ThirdGate. I work at this company since a year. We're into security and smart cards and encryption and whatnot. So we have big clients like, for example, the German government. So I am their Apple guy, working on iOS, macOS, and all that kind of stuff. Been an iOS developer since the very beginning, 2008. I'm also, conferences are nothing kind of new to me, because I built one myself called SwiftConf over there in Germany, in Cologne, where I'm from. And also started a podcast about Apple called Pomcast, because Pom in French, Apple, about around 2005, which got me into the community. So big community fan. I'm also, because this is going to be very ethical, political, whatever, Green Party member. I've been 4 years in the city council, so I've been praising stuff like privacy, among other stuff. So this is why I try to apply this in my job. Where I'm from is a very complicated question. My parents are from Spain. They moved to Belgium, where I was born. Whenever you look for friends on the emojis, the first you have is baguette. This is very interesting. So my mother tongue is French, and I live in Germany for the last 15 years. And the last flag is one I really like, deep to my heart, and goes together with the fact that I don't really believe in borders or nations. I am whatever, European, international. I'm a dad of 4 kids, and with the same woman, I have to mention. It's not obvious, right? So my daughters are 12 and 10, and my sons are 6 and 2.5. I speak French with 3 of them and Spanish with the last one. It's crazy. I know. I'm also an activist, and warning, it's going to be, the next few slides are going to be a little bit harsh, but to describe why I think privacy is one of those karma themes, which I think are important. So it's going to be, the next slides are going to be about me, but also about the subject. What do I mean when I say I'm an activist? There are different stuff that I declare myself as an activist. Maybe some of you have looked at my t-shirt the whole day. It doesn't say I'm a dangerous guy, it says welcome my friend. And I'm really crazy about learning new languages and culture. Speaking of which, because I know there is a lot of Italians here, I've been learning Italian for the last 3 weeks. So if you speak to me, please try to speak to me in Italian. I will pretend that I understand you. That's what I did 15 years ago in Germany, kind of worked. I'm also involved into the environment. As I was saying, there is this thing called the Hambach forest in Germany, which we managed until now to kind of save from being like destroyed for generating electricity. So if you can, if you have the means to do this, try to involve yourself in like fighting against gas pipelines, for example, in Italy, and install solar panels on your roof. I mean, there is sun here in this country. I mean, not the last month, but there's a reason for that also. I have a funny story about that. I'm vegan, so 2 funny stories. One, yesterday I was outside with 2 friends, and I was asking, so what's in the vegetarian burger? And the lady explained me what was inside, And because there was a couple of things like milk and whatever, I said, no, thanks, I'm going to have something else. And she told me, I also have fish. 2, I really liked what we had for lunch. I ate it, and I was like, this tastes something that I know. Fish. So anyway, it's fun to be a vegan because you're laughing the whole year anyways. But speaking of heroes, when they invited me for the conference, by the way, thank you very much. Amazing conference. I was really grateful. I was thinking like, hero, not so much of a hero. I mean, the heroes for me are in Litlib, or they're trying to save a forest, or trying to save animals. If you want to be an hero as a developer, though, there is a way. You can pick your weapon of choice. There are many weapons you can use. And one of these is trying to protect your users' privacy. So this could be the new logo for iOS. It's a proposal to Apple. It's free. The privacy is mine, as we sometimes shout when we are like doing some activism. Whose forest? My forest. Whose privacy? Mine. So that's why I'm going to show you what I call the karma-oriented API. Technically, it's super easy stuff. It's more about you, like punching the table over and over again in the next meetings to remind everybody in the company that this thing is important. And whenever we speak about privacy, I have to think about Steve. And so this is why I'm going to let you listen to what Steve said back in 2010, at the very beginning.
We've always had a very different view of privacy than some of our colleagues in the Valley. We take privacy extremely seriously. As an example, we worry a lot about location in phones. And we worry that some 14-year-old is going to get stalked and something terrible is going to happen because of our phone. And so, as an example, before any app can get location data, we don't make it a rule that they have to put up a panel and ask, because they might not follow that rule. They call our location services and we put up a panel saying, this app wants to use your location data. Is that okay with you? Every time they want to use it. And we do a lot of things like that to ensure that people understand what these apps are doing. That's one of the reasons we have the curated app store. We have rejected a lot of apps that want to take a lot of your personal data and suck it up into the cloud. A lot.
So we're going to speak about the subject of uploading my data as a user to some random servers. It's a big thing, and it happens a lot more than you might think. Mostly is because of us developers not taking the right decision. What we'll cover is pretty simple, actually. If you open your phone, you go in the settings, and you go in privacy. This is pretty much a lot of the stuff over there which we'll cover. I'm not going into everything, obviously, because I don't have the time to that, but I will go into photos, I will go into contacts. Location is a big thing, obviously. We'll speak about the calendars, even though the API is very old. And very briefly, I will touch on stuff like Siri and search, and notifications and healthkit, right? It all depends on the time that I have and how fast I am. So why is privacy important? Well, the thing is, you have to see your users as kind of yourself, right? Like, behind every user, it's not a number, it's a real person with real data. So it's you're basically tapping into their private life, right? Whether you access their contacts, whether you access their photos, it's a person. So try to think this way. Apple itself is building trust with the privacy logo. They put it everywhere since, I think, iOS 11 and since the last release of macOS. But the other thing is that it is not only good for the karma, right, which is very important, but it's also good for commerce, to be honest. I mean, Apple, it's kind of a marketing argument that people are buying iPhones rather than other platforms. I almost said the word, because of the privacy. So it's good for the commerce. The other thing is that most of iOS is on-device processing. It's kind of weird that it's in this slide. Why is privacy important? It's a good thing that Apple is pretty bad at the web. They're really good at on-device, and this is where they keep on doing stuff, and they will keep on saying, we do this on-device, blah, 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 blah. If you've seen a couple of APIs from Apple, which are not on-device, but more like on the server, or stuff like CloudKit, you would know that as a developer, it's a good thing they stay on the device. And finally, again, treat your users like you want it to be treated, like if it was you, right? So I built a little app called myprivacy.app. I've originally called it privacy.app, but then I realized that if I go in settings privacy, it's the same that if I go in settings privacy, my app. So if you name your app the same as a menu, it's a mess. Anyway, it's at the end of the talk, I will give you the URL where it is. It's basically on GitLab. It's a simple demo app with, which also links to the privacy settings. It has contacts, calendars, locations, stuff like that, and it has Siri. I was surprised when I first built it for the simple fact that I hadn't done anything with Siri yet. I wasn't into Siri. I wasn't into analyzing Siri. The way I go into this stuff is every part of my talk, I do some research. I do a lot of research. And by the way, enter kind of a new journey with me, because Siri is also pretty new to me, so you might discover what I am currently working on. I'm trying to figure out a lot of stuff in Siri and search. The first thing is that, again, it's a research in progress. Siri is default for every app. It's not something you get asked for, but it's something you have to opt out. So it's by default opt-in. Your app is going to be in settings Siri every time, but in Siri and search, the other way around, you're not necessarily going to find your app. So it's kind of a mess. By the way, there is always two ways of entering the privacy settings. It's either you go in privacy and you have your app, or you go in your app and then you have privacy, right? And also I was freaked out to read this this little thing at the bottom over there, which says here that Siri may learn from the suggestions that you are doing based on how you use the app. So it's kind of freaking out when I was reading this. So let me make the thing clear, by the way. I'm a huge Apple fan, but I'm also very critical to what they do sometimes, because they can always be better. So the Siri intents, they have a couple of interesting stuff. For one, they can be done with authentication. So there are some stuff you can say to Siri where Siri will tell you, I'm not going to give you the answer unless you show me your face on an iPhone 10, for example. So this is a good thing. Also, the IN person needs access to the contacts. And this is kind of weird because I will later speak about the out-of-process pickers. And I think it could be done in another way. So it actually, because for me, saying the name of a contact on my phone is technically like picking the contacts in the picker. But if you don't have a full access to the contact database, Siri is not going to give you a lot of information in this IN person. The nodes, there is a nodes intent, a bank intent. There are so many different stuff on Siri, which I'm always very thoughtful as to, is it something that I, as a user, really want an app to basically decide without my control? So that's interesting. Apple says in a DubDub 18 session that it's that this model is secure and personalized to each user, and that all of their learning happens on device. But if you go in the settings of an app, which is in this case is Airmail, for example, then you will see what it says here at the very bottom, which I'm writing there, which is that apps you use with Siri may send your contacts to Apple. So I don't know, actually. Maybe it's not all on device, anyway. So I'm still working my way into the Siri stuff because it's going to be a big stuff, as we also saw with the talk from Ellen. By the way, Ellen also speaks Italian with a Spanish mixed up accent like me, so if you want to try her on this. So photos is an interesting one because photos obviously are very personal. So for many of those APIs, you always have to ask a permission. This is pretty straightforward. You request an authorization and you get an answer being either authorized, so you said yes as a user, denied, you said no as a user, not determined is you haven't said anything yet. And the last one, restricted, confuses a lot of people, but it's basically that the user doesn't have the choice. Like it's either a parental control or it's any other kind of like enterprise stuff. So as a developer, whenever you see restricted, you don't even have to ask the user to go in the settings to change blah, 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 because he won't even be able to do it, right? So move over and do something else. So when I do those research, I do very basic stuff. I do the least amount of work possible, and so I have a lot of time apps crashing on my face, which is a good thing because I discover that obviously the first thing you should know whenever you do something with privacy, many other stuff in the meantime with Apple, you have to go in the plist, the info plist, and you have to add what's called a user's description. This wasn't like that a couple of years ago on iOS, so it's great. An app actually tells you what it wants to do with your data. And it is supposed to actually do what it says it's doing. Apple is supposed to review this and I mean to check this, which they don't always do. So this is one from the photos. It's called NS Photo Libraries Users Description, which has a very nice version of it if you go on the plist editor, this is what shows up whenever the Detect Locations app from Felix Krause, which I will mention again at the end of this talk, runs. So, and you see to visualize your photos on a map is what's written in the middle, right? So there is another one which is new since I think iOS 11, if I get it right, which is the write-only mode. So you can actually ask an app to have like a write-only version, like only write-only access. It has like an old school selector with like a bunch of of very C-ish call to the callback. I tried to find a more modern version with completion, but that second one actually, it's just something we can speak about later, doesn't actually work because it will require full access. I personally would prefer Apple. I open the bug report for them. I open bug reports all the time. This is like my passion. That they should give us like just read only, read and write, and write only. Right now you have either write only or you have read and write. So, and because the problem is that, read and like write, the write possibility allows technically a random app to fill up your phone, right? It's very easy to write a loop and that will fill up your phone with millions of images. That app might have a couple of 1 stars, but still the damage is done. So this is new key since iOS 11. It's called NS Photo Library Adds Usage Description. So it's not even a cumulative permission like location. I will show you later where, the way you can escalate permissions with location. With iOS 11, it's not like that. Sorry, with the write-only permissions. Speaking about asking again, let's listen one last time what Steve was saying about asking, because asking the user is actually quite important.
Privacy means people know what they're signing up for in plain English and repeatedly. That's what it means. I'm an optimist. I believe people are smart, and some people want to share more data than other people do. Ask them. Ask them every time. Make them tell you to stop asking them if they get tired of your asking them. Let them know precisely what you're going to do with their data. Okay. That's what we think.
So I'm not really sure about that ask them every time, because every time I hear this video, I'm thinking about Windows Vista. Are you sure you want to install this app? Are you sure you want to start this app? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? So there's a very hard balance to find as a developer to not piss off too much the user by asking him or her every 5 minutes something. But it's important to let people know what I actually do with that thing. So once the user said he wants, or sorry, it doesn't want to have to have access to it doesn't want you to have access to its data, you're out of luck. You cannot ask him again. You cannot ask the user again. But you have one thing you can do is you can use this wonderful UI application open settings URL string. You have to pronounce that in one time. And then you can jump to the settings API, right? That's what I did in my tiny demo app. And over there, you can see then it's kind of the ask again version. You can then tell him, okay, if you selected never, that's the reason why I cannot do anything, right? Oh, by the way, very important thing, if you're a developer, you will need to reset those alerts because you want to try this, right? Because you want to see the request coming again. So if you go in settings, general, reset, and you use reset location and privacy, it's going to reset everything, but be careful, only do that on the simulator or on a test device, not on your own device, because it's going to reset every single permission for every app. So every app will ask you again every permission. So might be on your real device, might be a little bit boring. All right, so speaking of pictures and of photos, a picture is worth 1,000 words, they say. I say it's worth 1,000 metadatas. Because pictures have metadata. Like, for example, here I created a class which actually takes an asset, like a PH asset. And by the way, I'm not going into every single detail of every single API. If you want to learn about the photos framework and like the class PH asset, then check out the documentation from Apple. I'm just focusing on the privacy stuff. So I'm initializing with the asset, and I'm getting the coordinate from the asset location, right? Because when you take a picture, when you start your camera the first time, it will ask you, do you want to use the location? So it means all your pictures have a location, and they definitely have a date when they were taken. So what you should do instead, or actually I should mention, what you could do instead of asking the full control to the photos library is you could use this wonderful UI image picker controller. This is where the user decides which picture he gives. That's not even in photos, that's in UI kit. And basically you instantiate this guy, and then you say it's either using the photo library or the camera, it's presenting you, and because you've said that the delegate is myself, I'm getting a callback called image picker controller. This finish picking media with info. Sadly, you can only select one photos, not like with contacts, which we'll see later. And this dictionary it gives you back has different keys, which are interesting. One is the image URL, which is somewhere on your device. The other one is a PH asset, which is a full object, but this, again, only if you have full access to the whole photo database. So it's kind of counterproductive, because if I have always access already, maybe I can use it in other ways. And the two last ones are very important. It's the original image, the one you selected, and the edited image. This one is only there when you have editing allowed or something like that on. All right, so let's move on to contacts. Kind of deeply in love with the contacts API, because back in the days when it appeared, it wasn't asking for any permissions. Like back in iPhone OS 2, you could technically, as a developer, steal without any shame all the contacts from the user, and it wouldn't even ask if it's okay to do it or not. This crash, which I'm showing now, is again the same thing that happens. You've seen it before. You need a contacts users description. Same thing, right? Oh, by the way, there is a list of those privacy keys if you want to see everything you can do, stuff with Bluetooth, stuff with the camera, with Face ID and whatnot. All related to privacy. So I've spoken already about a couple of times about the so-called out-of-process alert. How would you know that something is out of process? There's a very simple way. Is you start your app, you wait for the alert to come when you are in Xcode, you quit the app, like you kill it in Xcode, right? And if the alert is still there, it means it's out of process, right? Because your app, you killed your app, so this thing doesn't belong to your app. That is a very good sign in terms of privacy, because it means whatever accessed this is not you but Apple. That's what Steve was referring at the beginning of the talk. It sounds like Steve is giving the talk with me. That sounds interesting. Anyway, yeah, you should always check the authorization status, by the way, because some people out there, and myself probably in the past, are just like taking for granted that once the user told me it's okay, you can access to my contacts or to my photo or whatever, they will stay on that decision. People can go in the settings and change that decision, so you shouldn't like, I don't know, like save in a Boolean the status, the user said yes, and then you would want to have access, and then you would potentially crash or have some other problem, right? So always check the same status, again, not determined, restricted, denied, or authorized. Yeah. So what you could do, one of the things that I do is, for example, if I'm authorized, I just proceed and I query. If it's not determined, then I request the access. By the way, the second one is not a big deal because this request access won't do anything anyway if you have already asked, right? It's just going to be ignored. And the last one, you're out of luck. Yeah. So which properties can be accessed by the Contacts API? Actually a lot. All the stuff you see in your Contacts API. So it's the name, the first name, the last name, the nickname, the job, for example, stuff like that. And also like the email, obviously, but the relation, also there is like a relation key. So it's a relationship between, so basically an app could know who is my wife, technically, if I told my iPhone. And by the way, if I say to Siri, call my wife, Siri will ask me, tell me who your wife is. And if you enter the name, then Siri will change that for you. So you might even not remember that you changed, that you told Siri, this is my brother, this is my mother, whatever. So for the contact, I like to take an approach referring to an old movie and start by seeing how the good developer would do that. So the good developer would basically get a predicate which is only matching one guy and would only ask for the given name and the family name. And then it would just ask for this, right? So it's giving you back one guy in this case. The bad developer, and a very small set of API of data. The bad developer could say, okay, I'm only getting one guy, but I'm getting all this thing. That's a lot of thing. I mean, that's the phone numbers, that's the address where the guy lives, and we'll see later what you can do with this, and a lot of stuff. The ugly developer would just basically take everything and upload it to some random server. Yeah. So those icons might feel familiar from the last days. Anyways, we'll come back about speaking about the bad developer. What I want you to remember for that is you don't have to be Tuco. You don't even have to be Blondie in the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you have to be potentially that one guy in the meeting that says to the manager, no, we're not doing this. I could go on and on and on with other subjects like tracking the users. Nope, we're not doing it. But anyways, that's a lot of things we can not do. So, dear app, I don't want you to have access to all my contacts, for example. So actually it turns out you don't need to have access to all my contacts because I can use Contacts UI. This is an out-of-process picker again, which you basically can present the same thing as we saw with the Photos API, and then you will get a callback called did select contact. And there's another version which is the multiple version. This one is called did select contacts. It's just plural. Be careful, once you implement this guy, the other one will be ignored. So there's no property on the controller saying allow multiple or something like that. Also, there's a pretty ugly UI here with two buttons near each other. But anyways, also there is a very nice bug deep to my heart where if you go and search something, you won't be able to select anyone anymore. anyways, Apple knows, apparently. So if you need to have two versions of like single or multiple, the easy workaround is to have basically two delegates. If some of you have seen the talks of Paul, we shouldn't have the delegates being in the same class anyways, so right? So the context with location, that's interesting because in the context you can actually geocode a postal address. So the process of geocoding is from an address like one infinite loop to get the latitude and longitude, right? And so you can technically just add this to a map. So how did I do this? I just did an extension to CL placemark, which is an MK annotation, and then I'm returning that location coordinate. So some of you might want to kill me right now because they see this bang here. They will be like, oh, location, it's terrible. So what do you want me to do? I mean, the problem is before you ask for the coordinates, you should technically look that the location is a nil, right? And sometimes what even Apple does, for example, is they return you 0, 0. Which is a very bad idea because 0, 0 is somewhere in the sea, just beneath Africa, like at this border of Africa, so you would just end up in a very zoomed blue screen and you would think like, oh, this is the blue screen of death. No, this is just the sea. The problem is inherent to structures, right, to structs. It's a struct with two numbers and so 0, 0, obviously. Somebody thought it was a good idea. Anyway, so location, map kit, of course. First of all, whenever I start an app, I place an app in an app, a map in an app. There's no question asked yet, but it still already knows that I'm in Italy, for example, which is very interesting. So you would think maybe it's the regional settings. No, they are German. So I am pretty sure actually it's very simple. It's the IP address. IP address from Italy, IP address from Germany. I know where you are, kind of. Not exactly where, but to me, this should be also asked to the user because if the user says, I don't want to be located, so I don't even want you to know that I'm in Europe. So the way you request a user about his location is there are different ways. One is using when in use and one is using always. So if you use, if you use, it's obvious if you use always, it doesn't matter if the app is running. If you use when in use, you might think that it will only work when the app is in front, but it turns out that even if you just release the app is still in use. It's very, the border over there, it depends on many different factors. Anyways, very quickly on the colored bar, because it's interesting to get the colors right, tells you the guy which is colorblind. The blue is for location without authorization, which is kind of a borderline thing, hard to define. The red is for the microphone, and the 2 times green call, you remember this big thing. Luckily on the iPhone 10, the UI got way better. The last one is the iPhone Christmas. Because it's Christmas, whatever. I get it always wrong. Anyway, so it's the same colors, but it's around the time, which is way better, especially because you don't have this big double time anyway. So in this case, the app hasn't crashed. I was confused because there are, whenever you forget the info playlist key, some APIs will crash, others won't even crash. And to be honest, in this case, it should crash. I am happy with apps crashing on my face when I have done something wrong as a developer. This is why you are paid for. Because if it's going to crash on the user at one point, it's worst. So with great power comes great responsibility. As a developer, you should ask yourself, do you really need to have to access the locations info when you're not using the app? Also, potentially the lawyers in your company, if you work in a big company, might explain you why it's not always a good idea to have access to users' data. Might be very expensive. In the meantime, we have GDPR, which is a good thing in itself. Except you should really stop using the English word privacy when you speak about privacy in Italian. You have a language, use it. Anyway, the user, as a user, you should ask yourself: do you want this app to have access to your location, right, all the time. And finally, another karma thing is the battery. That's good for another talk, which I will hopefully be able to do at one point. But we as developers are also environmentally responsible. We're responsible of not draining the battery of our users, and we are responsible of not having them to charge their device more than they have to do, because, you know, those things are empowered by solar panels on the back of the iPhone. Yeah, we'll see. So a good indication of privacy is the arrow, the hollow or full arrow, as you can see on the right. Hollow means so when it's not full, it means that it's not actively getting your location. The significant location change, you have to know that an app, it's great that an app doesn't pull your location change every time, but if you're walking in a street, it will just put the significant change when you are turning, right? So that's a good thing. Be aware of system services. I will come back to that later, because they are pretty mean. So the location alert has evolved over the years. I have to look at the time. Let's see, where am I? I'm going to be, how long do I still have? Like 10 minutes? Yeah, 10 minutes, right. Okay, so the user, so the first time you should ask the user when in use, this is new since iOS 8. Before it was always this anyway. The explanation is in the settings. I have to be a little bit more quicker. The user could also be asked with 3 options. If you like ask always, right? This is kind of ugly. So there is a better way of doing this, which is to wait, I'm a little bit confused. Yeah, exactly. So there's a better way to do this, is if you first do the first one, right? If you first do this one, and then you finally ask the second one, because in this case, you first ask the request when in use, so you have don't allow or allow, and then you ask the request always, so you have no don't allow anymore, right? It's also nicer for the user, because you're not gross with the user right at the beginning. You're not directly saying, so are we going for dinner tonight? But you're first saying, okay, let's first go to the cinema or whatever. Anyway, one more thing, the settings, privacy, location services, system services, have a look over there. Pretty frightening. You can turn off some of this stuff. The calendar, I go very quickly over it because the calendar hasn't changed a lot over the years. It's basically the same idea with the same kind of, you know, they're very similar to the photos or to the contact. The gist of it is, you will crash again, obviously, that it has access to all your calendars. And there's one which is especially interesting, is the birthday calendar. So right, I don't even know why Apple needs to know that my preferred color is pink, but anyway. So this is a way for an app to ask you what you have done in the past. You could even ask what you have done in the past 4,000 years, but luckily it's a chunk of 4 years every time. So what you can do is, yeah, so that's the explanation for that, by the way. What you can do in this case is, so what you would do is you would ask for the store, which is the list of calendar events you have, to give me back this predicate, and this predicate is built, by the way, with 4 years ago. Whenever you think 4 years ago, please do not do 365 times 4 times whatever it is, but there is NSDate components for that. And you could also ask, where have you been, you know, because the calendar asks you your location as well. So what I want you to take from this talk is, a lot of time, if you don't get that information from the left, you will get it from the right, otherwise from the top, otherwise from the bottom. There is always a way to enter your privacy in some ways, except if you close everything, and this is not very convenient. There's this thing called the structured location, which give you an address, but also the geo coordinate. And so I could show you where you were. I could show you that I was working on my talk while being in Machu Picchu. That would be awesome. I just faked this. And I could open the URLs and emails your friends. Why can I email your friends? Because I have in this event, that's a lot of data, right? I have in this event, I have the attendees, also the recurrence, so I can know what you do every week. Like, I could, like, as a very mean developer, I could look in your calendar and say, so you go to the gym every Monday. So the EventKit UI is weird because it's not an out of process. It's not like Contacts UI. You need access to your calendar, and yeah. So very quickly, notifications. They are by definition disturbing. The background fetch kind of interfere with your privacy. Also, you're not even asked as a user if you want background fetch to happen. Again, it's hard if you ask the user about everything. Be careful with what kind of song you use. And the user will never know what you will display to him, which is kind of, but I mean, there's not a lot of things you can do about it. HealthKit does it in a very interesting way. They have this thing called the object type, which is where it's from. There is, the kind of thing, then there is the source, and then there is the central store, which is the same for all the apps. But what I like about them is they have this fine-grained permissions, right? And a good example of one thing they do really good is they don't even give you a feedback as a developer when you have read authorization, because it could mean that if you don't want an app to know that you are using you're checking your sugar in your blood, for example, then an app would know that you're diabetic, and so this would be very concerning. More than APIs, Apple has the review process on the App Store, so there are a couple of things that you might look later when I post this talk. So one thing is that apps should only request access to the data relevant to the core functionality, and I love this last one, where possible, use the out-of-process pickers rather than requesting your full access. I don't know, maybe WhatsApp hasn't been reviewed by Apple. So for reference, this is where this stuff, the demo app that I did is. It's on GitLab, was originally on GitHub, and then they were bought by Microsoft. I did a Mac app doing kind of the same stuff, right? I'm still working on it. It's very basic. Big plug for Felix Krause, which has done a lot of research on privacy, so check out definitely his website. There are a lot of videos, I don't know for you, but I'm watching a lot of videos from Apple. And also there is this security paper, which is very important. And with that, we're done and would be ready. Oh, no, we're not.
Well, I think the privacy thing has gotten totally out of control. And I think most people are not aware of who is tracking them, how much they're being tracked, and sort of the large amounts of detailed data that are out there about them, nor about the companies that possess the data.
That's pretty frightening. Oh, this is the wrong language. Oh, this one is also wrong. All right, this one is also wrong. All right, this would be a good one. But I will finish with this one because I love it more. So if you have any questions, just go ahead. I'm done, by the way. Thank you very much for listening.